more than ever, you need technology you can rely on.
頼れる人ですよね。I'm a Dell Technologies advisor.
Ich auch.
我也是。
moi aussi.
And if you're a small business, we're with you.
We are with you.
Estamos com você.
We want to help.
So we'll be right here.
At home, answering your calls, providing support,
And standing by you every step of the way.
Bye-bye.
We're going to have a great panel discussion on building global connections, and moderating this panel is going to be Priya Rajan, and I'm going to introduce Priya Rajan to you, and she's going to take over. Priya Rajan is the Managing Director of Global Gateway at Silicon Valley Bank. As the market lead for India, Middle East and North Africa, and Southeast Asia, she provides international market entry advice and introductions with a focus on technology and innovation, cross-border companies, entrepreneurs, and venture capital funds in emerging markets. Prior to this role, she was a director of early stage practice. Priya calls on her experience, expertise, and connections to champion a more inclusive innovation economy. She works closely with community and diversity ecosystem partners, including Change Catalyst, K4 Capital, and others. Priya has partnered with the Dorm Room Fund, the House Fund, the Stanford Venture Studio, and Rough Draft Ventures. Previously, Priya spent several years as the group controller for Silicon Valley Bank Financial Group, and also had held senior positions at Charles Schwab. Priya holds an MBA from Cornell University and is a California CPA. She's on the board of Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and Women Who Code, an organization dedicated to helping women to excel in tech careers as well. In addition, Priya is also a charter member of Silicon Valley and a venture partner at the X Fund. Taking bold steps with confidence is Priya's forte, both on the job and off. In her free time, believe it or not, she loves to skydive. She's also a world traveler. And so when you do see her or talk to her, ask her about Kenya, her favorite spot so far. Priya also enjoys classical music, which she has studied for a decade. And with that, I turn the session over to Priya to moderate this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kumar. If I can ask all of my panelists to put yourself on video and unmute yourself. Awesome. I see Saket, I see Umesh, I see Nishith, and I think we're probably waiting for Kamakshi. But you know, I want to keep up with the time so we can get started, and I'm sure she'll log in. Great, you guys all look great today. Thank you all for joining the panel today. I mean, it's a great segue from our last panel that was well moderated by our friend BJ about founder hustle, challenges, and the stress that comes with the journey. And in general, the founder journey is hard, and add that to the new normal we're in, it is extremely hard. We have 4 amazing panelists. Hopefully, Kamakshi will be able to join us shortly, who are great friends of mine and proud to say clients of ours at SAB, who are living it and thriving it, if I may say. I'm a bit biased, you guys, and building these global businesses. To the founders and aspiring founders who are listening to the call today, we're here to get some lessons learned and key insights through their journey, and how you could put you know, some of those into practice as you build your global footprint and building your connections. My ask would be put your questions, post your questions on chat, and we'll try to address as much as we can. We're trying to keep the panel discussion short so we can get more of your questions answered. So feel free to start putting them on here. Let's get started. It would be great if each of you could just introduce yourself, talk about name of the company, no, yours and name of the company, and what does a startup do, like more like a Twitter intro. And a curveball that I'm going to throw, because I didn't say that I'm going to ask you about something that new that you picked up staying at home. For me, it's cooking, surprise. So let's start with Umesh, to you.
Priya, it's a pleasure to be on the panel with you and everybody else, and it's going to be a lot of fun in the next few minutes. My name is Umesh Sachdev. I'm founder CEO of Uniphore. I'm a computer science engineer by education, a serial entrepreneur. I've done 2 startups. Uniphore is a 12-year-old company which is into artificial intelligence and automation. in customer service in the area of contact centers. We are headquartered in Palo Alto, but we're global in 10 different countries. The one thing that I learned, which is, I'm most proud of, is to do my own hairstyling while sitting at home.
See, I'm telling you, new skills are going to come out of this COVID. Saket.
Hey Priya, hello everybody. This is Saket Modi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a cybersecurity startup. We started from India. I last year moved to the Valley, and we've got a global organization. We help organizations to quantify the cybersecurity risk that they're sitting on, and we do it for some very large Fortune 50 companies around the world. Something new that I picked up during the lockdown. Well, I've been one of those lucky people who got to be with my family. So my sister has been cooking a lot of things. So I would say becoming a good, I would say Master Chef jury member, where I get to rate how well the food is, and I think I never knew I had that skill, but I think that's something I picked up. But being in cybersecurity, it's only been more busier than the normal times which are there. Yeah.
Great, Saket. Nishith?
Yeah, thanks Priya for having us here. And if any of the last few panels with you, is an example, there's going to be an ultra comfortable one, which makes us all say all things which we regret post the panel. But yeah, I look forward to a fun one. So glad to see everyone. Hey Umesh, hey Saket. I see Kamakshi has joined us as well. I'm Nishith. I'm the founder at LOCUS.sh. Prior to this, along with my co-founder, we were building the AWS machine learning platform. We have a bunch of handwritten code there. LOCUS is a R&D heavy startup where effectively we are trying to create a supply chain officer out of algorithms, right? There's been a lot of tech around supply chain visibility in the last couple of decades, but our question is what lies beyond it, right? Can we move towards decision making? And our focus is to build, a real world enterprise grade system. Real world isn't made of spherical chickens in vacuum. None of us write our addresses perfectly, or we really mean 3 p.m. when we say 3 p.m. How do we build algorithmic systems to automate that kind of physical work? Right. Yeah, so that's a quick shot about us.
Great. What's the new skill that you picked up?
Oh yeah. So I've been trying to control my resting heartbeat, and I've been trying to get it under 60. I've been clocking something like 61, 62. I started somewhere about 76. So yeah, I've been pretty happy about that.
It's great. Kamakshi, thank you for joining. We just started, so we're starting with an intro, just a Twitter style intro about you, the company, the Drawbridge, and you can also talk about what you're doing now, and something that you picked up staying at home.
All right. Well, great to meet all of you. As Nishith said, knowing Priya, this would certainly be a super awesome panel. By way of introduction, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Drawbridge that was acquired by Microsoft and LinkedIn last year. Our capability or product that we brought to market was an enterprise identity product, given sort of the emerging consumer trend of attention fragmentation across different devices, platforms. The notion around consumer identity is becoming increasingly important, not only from a marketing applications perspective, when you think about any internet experience, whether it is security, authentication, fraud, personalization, all of that require the notion of consumer identity. So we basically brought to market a consumer identity product. Knowing how important it is, obviously we had some strategic value prop that we were offering to Microsoft and LinkedIn, and we were acquired last year. It was a great exit. The run was about 8 years, and have war stories of what it takes to grow, scale, and then exit. Certainly some topics that I think Priya certainly wants us to all talk about as well. In terms of a new skill that I picked up, staying at home, I didn't know what life at home looked like. I was very much on the road all throughout the company. So this is I'm like, wow, this is how life at home looks like. So, and I also have a 17-month-old daughter. So this is giving me time to connect with her in probably the best place, which is home. So that's certainly a new skill for me.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing that. Let's start with the macro question, right? I think attendees here today, I mean, there's a lot of discussion, not just in this session, but also in other webinars about the macroeconomic climate, about, just more on the venture climate, but let's talk more on the US, India, and this panel is about cross-border. The cross-border ecosystem, which you're all thriving in and living it, breathing it. What do you see from your perspective, the projected impact of the startup ecosystem, say to the end of the year going into next year? You can talk about any topic. It could be fundraising, it could be just your customers, it could be anything. So if you have to pick from a macro standpoint, Umesh, maybe just a quick, your thoughts.
So Priya, from the macro US-India ties perspective, I'm part of another group which is called USISPF. It's a not-for-profit trade body between the two countries, and I chaired the startup program within that. And we certainly believe that the biggest economic impact of getting the two countries together, especially from a startup point of view, now, medium, and the long term, is going to be massive job creation on both sides. We're talking about the world's largest and the third largest startup market, and the cross-border activity between that. We did a quick survey of just about 8 B2B SaaS companies which have done the US-India migration, founded in India, expanding in the US. These are all Series B and upwards funded. What we found that was these 8 companies have created about 640 jobs in the US, close to 6,000 jobs globally. The median salary of the jobs created in the US is about $175,000, which is 3 times the country's average, right? And what we found that for each founder who did the migration, for each visa issued to get the founder in the country, there were 40 high-paying jobs created, and that number was likely to double in the year. So this year, in the medium term and in the long term, I'm extremely bullish that these are 2 natural partners, 2 large democracies, value of education, value of technology. There's a lot of common shared values. The startup activity on both sides is extremely healthy and thriving and growing. And if we merge these 2 ecosystems together, it's going to be a net positive. With jobs get created, economies grow, and I just see a win-win overall.
100%. And you're one of them creating those jobs. We'll get to that a bit. Saket, to you. You're on mute, Saket.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, thanks, Priya. So first of all, I echo everything that Umesh said. I've been fortunate to see both the sides because we started in India and now expanding in the US. I think if you look at it historically, what India has been known for has been a very, very strong tech talent, and the US had a very strong startup ecosystem, right? The Silicon Valley and the whole, how do you drive startups and things around that. If you see today, it's in some ways inspired by the US, but India today actually has a dedicated startup strategy from the government, from the central government. It has a digital transformation strategy as Digital India. And it's almost like, how the US was behaving a couple of decades back. And that's the reason why it is where it is today. And when you compile that with, what's already there in the US in terms of, the great ideas and the learnings and the mistakes and all of those things, when you combine the 2, I think, even the time that it took the US to actually come to a $15-16 trillion economy, it's going to be much shorter for India. And while that happens, it's going to be a beautiful marriage between the 2 countries, as Umesh said, right? I mean, with democracies, young population in India, I think it was traditionally Indian companies looking at America as a very big market. So you make in India and go to the US. It's starting to shift now. You see Facebook, Google, everybody investing billions of dollars in India because now the market in India is also growing, the GDP is growing, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm extremely bullish. I second what Umesh said between the relationship of the 2 countries.
That's great. If Amitabh is listening, he'll be very happy. You just did a pro Invest India. Nishith?
So I will go more from the sales and revenue vantage, right? And I see that the very singular thing that differentiates a startup from a Kirana store, right, is not the size. I mean, Tesla is a large company, still referred as a startup by many, right, including being a public market company, is growth rate, right? With a global pandemic, your growth rate in any one market is gonna go down unless you're in an extremely few head sector, right? So to parallelize that, you need to look outwards, right? It just makes sense to look at more mature markets. When I say mature markets, I mean very, very specifically mature in terms of software buying, right? So Europe may be a great mature consumption market, but is not necessarily a great product buyer. It's a great service buyer, right? So if you're a service company, Europe is a very mature market, maybe not product, which effectively leaves US and Canada as definitely top two mathematical contentions to reach out to, to make sure you're still hitting your growth rate targets, to still sleep in bed comfortably and say you're a startup. So yeah, I think it's just a natural driver at this point to look at US for sales.
That's great. And Kamakshi, from your experience of the exit that you went through the whole journey, so how do you see this impacting the current ecosystem of founders of what's all happening around?
Yeah, I'd say that, post-exit, I've also been active in the angel investing community. I'm an LP in a number of pre-seed, seed, and Series A funds as well. The way I see some of this impacting sort of founders today in the capital raising cycle, and we have a few founders, active founders on the panel with me. Certainly they can chime in and provide their perspectives as well. The good companies are certainly still getting funded because where are funds going to, there are billions of dollars of funds, they do have to deploy them. So good companies are certainly getting funded, good founders are getting funded. For companies that are either sort of formed already and that are sort of having some impediments, some stumbling blocks along the way, times might be a bit rougher, but the good ones are enjoying the upside, irrespective of what sort of the macro trend or the sort of the pandemic and the storm that we are in the midst of. I also see, even if you think about equity versus debt, I think that dynamic also has changed a fair bit insofar as, how the founder perceives it, and certainly also how the venture and the debt community are also sort of responding to the times. I have a very sort of US-centric vantage point. Unfortunately, I don't have a very good view on how this is translating in India. I'm assuming that a lot of this must be very much horizontally translating there as well. Certainly happy to share some of my perspectives on how the equity debt dynamics, at least from my vantage point, I'm seeing it at the right time. But the headline is good companies are still getting funded. In fact, I backed a company that raised a 7 million pre-seed. I mean, this is what venture has now become, right? Yeah. Pre-seed rounds are 7 million rounds at a 20 million pre-valuation. Yeah. So those kind of deals are happening all day long. So I would certainly say that if a company is good, market is strong, founders are good.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamakshi. I think oh, sorry. Nishith, you're going to add something?
Yeah. And in hindsight, I'm thinking you will love it. But yeah, I would just like to double down on the point Kamakshi mentioned that right now, at least in a lot of founder circles, debt capital as an instrument to profitability is such a hot conversation, right? I've had more conversations about it in the last quarter than probably the last 3 years, right? And interestingly, all of these founders, including including me, to be honest, all of us are doing this not to avoid the next raise, but simply to get a stellar terms on the next raise, right? All of us are looking to do the next raise, but using debt capital to get within the interval of plus minus 20% EBITDA just give you such incredible leverage during raise.
Great. No, thank you, Nishith. So, question more for you. I want to start off with you. Let's now dive right into some of the specifics, right? Especially if you're a founder starting from India and now taking your step into the global market, trying to expand the footprint. Let's walk through some of the questions that we get often, and would love to see how you guys did what you did and what advice would you give? The timing. Question of timing comes up all the time. Nishith, from your experience, what is the right time for a startup founder to consider global? And what does that going global means, right? You moved recently. What were your key considerations for that decision?
Let me take that up in two parts, right? First, before I say anything, just, as Ben Horowitz said, the hard thing about hard things is there is no pattern, right? So it may not apply to some, right? And also, I'm not going to tell what we did because that was just a collection of mistakes. What I'm going to mention now is most distillation in hindsight. So I don't think we were this smart when we made a lot of stumble, right? But I think right now, if you look at it, you can actually boil it down to an equation, right? It's broadly consists of two variables, which is your average contract value and the potential growth rate you can achieve in the market, not the addressable market size, right? Let me go on each. So first is your average contract value, right? When you should hit a global market is completely different for a company selling a $10,000 product versus a $200,000 product. None of them on their own is more virtuous than the other, right? I'm not saying Twilio is less or more virtuous than SAP, but two different animals. The thing that differentiates is if you're selling a $100,000 upward product, even in US, you will need to put a feet on street, right? Which is a significant investment. You will need to engage in direct sales. If you're selling a $10,000 product, your economics will never make, like you can hire $60,000 interns in Florida, the maths will still not make sense to do direct sales, right? So then you need to sell it virtually via marketing, inside sales, and then you can start doing it on day one, right? If you're a $50,000 product, I would wait a year. If you're a $100,000 to a $250,000 product, I would say wait, not in terms of time, but wait till you think you at least have a repeatable sales cycle in your home market, right? That's very important because you need to take out all the deals you have done in your home market as bro deals, right? Like you have a large fancy cap table, you're going to call up your investor, that investor is going to call up one of the LPs and you're going to get a $500,000 deal, right? Hopefully, right? But if you take that out, have you built $1 million of repeatable engine? Because US, as I just said, is a pretty mature market. You will face better competition. So you don't want, your cost of experimentation is going to be high, right? So your first key variable is what's your ACV. That's decide whether you want to put a feet on street or not. And that in turn decides whether I should go on day one or day two. The second key variable is what is the next NTM? What's the next 12-month potential growth rate for you in your markets, right? Like a lot of people, especially when talking about, you know, the Asian demographics often quickly fall to the large consumer base, which is absolutely factually correct. And I would not actually get into a lot of debates on, you know, the addressable market, but I would, you know, put a slight strong foot forward on the law of diminishing returns, right? At what point can this market still sustain a minimum 100% growth rate? So, and your top two market combined, you're still growing 2x to 3x effectively, right? So I would base it this way. One word of caution I would say is that if you think you're going to go international 2-3 years down, also do what programmers do, design for future, implement for now. Set up a deliver entity on day zero, pay some transfer pricing for the first 2 years, not going to make a difference when you could make money, right? Like it's your lawyer's problem, not your problem. Don't build a 2% margin business anywhere. So yeah.
That's great advice. I mean, you covered so many. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Thank you. Thank you for being candid. That's great. Umesh, I'm going to go to you before we go into the product pivot, which Nishith addressed a bit. You know, we talked about the time, right? And Nishith addressed a bit on the products as well, like where the readiness of the product to be going global. Let's talk about region prioritization, right? You have a strong footprint globally, and starting with Chennai, which is my home city, how do you prioritize growth at this time? Like if a founder listening to this call is looking to broaden the footprint, how do they prioritize region? How do they know which one to go to? Is it US? Is it Southeast Asia? Obviously, it depends on where your market is, but how did you prioritize, and what are some of the tips and tricks that founders should take, especially at this time?
Absolutely. So I was going to say, I'm going to answer this in two different time frames, this time and usual time, because we are living in unusual times right now with the pandemic around us and world being very different. For a company that was founded in India, B2B, India is not the biggest TAM, and that's no surprise to anybody, right? In fact, for most B2B enterprise software, US is usually going to be 50% of your global TAM. That's how large North America is. That, you know, if you have $100 worth of goods to sell, 50 would be absorbed in the US, 50 is the rest of the world put together. So for us, in sort of deciding our global expansion strategy over the last decade or so, it's been about first picking markets where we can test and learn and fail fast if we have to. And those are markets closer to India, which mimic India, but, you know, have different characteristics, Middle East, Southeast Asia. As we gain more confidence, we started to get into the developed world with criteria similar to Nishith, slightly different, but, you know, we said, hey, are we ready for the US? If yes, let's go do it. Are we ready for Japan? If yes, let's go do it. Are we ready for Hong Kong and Singapore? If yes, let's go do it. In hindsight, if a company was founded in Silicon Valley, they would go global much later in their life, right? Because the US domestic market is so large that you're better off serving and winning in your home market before you think about expanding globally. However, in hindsight, as tides turned this year, I remember in January, I was in a conference in Melbourne and my co-founder had flown in from Singapore. I'd gone in from California. We were sitting down and he told me that, Umesh, I'm seeing something strange. I'm seeing 6 of our customers in Malaysia and other parts of the world beginning to tell us that they really like our product, but they want to move the decision out by 4 or 5 months. I said, usually 1 or 2 customers doing it is fine, but this seems like a trend. This was the early days where coronavirus was just a Wuhan specific crisis. But we picked up the signal way early because we saw Asia kind of shifting buying behavior. And it gave us 3 months more than our peers in America to kind of make some adjustments on products, pricing, supply chain, etc. And you can never be prepared for an event like this, but we were just ahead of the curve. What we then saw was in March, as all of us in the US went into a lockdown, a lot of our customers for the first 3 weeks were, the right word is say coma. There was no decision making happening. Nobody had a view of what's going to happen, etc. But we then saw markets in Asia were humming along. Markets like Vietnam, Hong Kong, Japan, Philippines, as if nothing had happened. And yet we saw Singapore and Malaysia also be in a coma. Then we saw different markets come out of this at different timeframes, and eventually US also did. So having a global footprint helped us keep the growth momentum. So we usually talk about in the company, we have 3 engines of growth depending on regions. We had 2 of our engines never failing. And that kept us going, and our growth rates didn't take a hit in any quarter. And so in hindsight, having gone global early paid off in pandemic. If I'm founding my company in Silicon Valley, I wouldn't do it for at least the first 3 or 4 years. If I'm founding my company in India, like Nishith said, I would do it day 1, right? So prioritizing markets is a very product specific and market specific argument, but should you do it is also very important.
Exactly. And just as a follow-on, I think Nishith mentioned and Kamakshi mentioned as well, when you're coming from country outside of US and not knowing what your competition is, right? I think, how do you size up your competition, especially if you're new to the region? And I know you said you had an advantage in this because you had an exposure outside, but how do you size up obviously because it's a mature market? How do you know what's in here? Obviously you can look through data that's available, what's not available.
Yeah, I would say first, in my growing years, my mom used to tell me, don't worry about what others are doing, be very careful about what you do. So my approach is I be aware of competition and what the market dynamics are, but I focus on fundamentally what can we do best, right? Especially in a time like this, you got to look inwards and say, are you a real band-aid to a customer or a must-have, right? And so in this time when customers around the world are hurting, most businesses are hurting one way or the other, are you able to reach out and really be empathetic, do an outreach and say, I'm here, I have something that you really need right now, and let's make it available to you in the most frictionless manner that we can, and we'll worry about other contractual terms later, right? So it's very important to continue to add value through innovation, through R&D, to your customers, in our case, contact centers. About 12 to 13 million contact center workers around the world are working remote right now, which is 5 times more than the world had ever seen contact center workers work remote, right? And that has brought it, with itself 50 new challenges, which neither us in the technology world nor in the contact center world had ever seen, right? And so this is a period that has been for me to focus on the customer. That said, in general, any mature product development, R&D organization has to keep its eyes and ears open on what the market is doing, what the peer group is doing, because, more often than not, when you show up to a new customer, they will say, I saw something like this with that. How are you different, right? You have to be able to answer that question. Fortunately, the era that we live in today, with social media, with internet, with enough enterprise tools, use something like 15 different tools to monitor the market, look at intents, what our customers are searching for, etc. It is very hard to remain stealth. in this
Yeah.
world, right? So we know a lot about our competition, as I'm sure they know about us. And once you know, then you follow my mom's advice. You know, don't keep worrying about and losing sleep over what your peers are doing. It's more about, you know, can you improve your grades or not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Kamakshi, I'm going to go to you for a bit. And Saket, I'm going to come right after. Building runway. So we hear about, you know, you need to, at least we have done so many of these webinars at SVB. We're hearing about investors asking for at least 12, sometimes 24, even 36 is a number I've heard for founders to build the runway. And you went through the whole journey, and you're doing now on the other side as an investor as well. And given a lot of the investors are now focusing significant portion, and we've been hearing 80% of the time in their current portfolio companies, you know, it's harder for new businesses to get funded. So what advice would you give for founders raising at this moment to be ready? Like, what would excite you when you're looking at an opportunity, right? And especially as they're building access to capital, we talked about equity and debt. Should they consider kind of a combo of the two, or one more than the other? And how does it all play out? Like, especially in this new normal that we're in.
Sure.
I know there's a lot of questions that I packed in there.
Yeah, there are a number of questions sort of baked in there. Before I answer that, I just wanted to say I 100% agree with sort of Umesh's perspective on the previous question. It's very product and sort of market specific, have so many scars. My only point is I'm not trying to answer that question. We literally made mistakes entering the sort of international markets at a time that we were not ready for. So in many ways, US companies founded here in the US, my biggest learning experience from sort of 8 years with the company Drawbridge is focus on the US market, have very strong footing here before you are able to expand externally, because there's a lot of upside to be gained here. And that certainly positions you well for international growth. Anyway, coming back to sort of this question that you were talking about, look, the equity versus debt dynamic, I think from my perspective has changed in a big way. I think Nishith was absolutely right. Like, you know, there's always a tendency for founders to basically lean towards debt to get you to that next round of financing so that you are able to have more favorable terms, more competitive terms under which you are able to raise that kind of capital and bring sort of value into the company. With that said, I think the debt equity dynamic has changed, with equity becoming more thoughtful versus same time last year. I think there is more demand for debt now than there was a year back. So I can see how the debt guys are also now having, it's more of a sort of a seller's market rather than a buyer's market, if I were to use that kind of analogy. So I still believe that the fundamental principle of leaning towards debt, if you are close enough, that's a very sort of important operating sort of clause there. If you believe you're close enough from a product market, escape velocity, fit perspective, if you're close enough, I think that tenet still holds. In terms of capital, I come from sort of the Sequoia Capital school of thought, which is conserving capital is good at all times, period, full stop, but especially these times. And that is true for yesterday. LinkedIn announced basically 1,000 people were effectively going to be laid off because of the impact to some of the critical lines of business. Now, if a company that has Microsoft's balance sheet to support it has to make that kind of decision, it is true for other companies that are much smaller and have much smaller leverage capabilities as well. So capital conserving is absolutely critical. But again, there is sort of the right balance. If you do believe that a product is key and king, if you do believe that the right product initiatives set you up for success in the near term when we emerge out of all of this, or in the medium term, then that is the sort of the balance and the trade-off that you absolutely have to sort of, you know, weigh in and consider. But from my perspective, capital conservation is absolutely critical. The equity debt trade-off is not as leaning towards, you know, a buyer's market insofar as how debt was before. Debt is more competitive now than it was before. Certainly, if you're able to lean on that to be able to build that kind of product advantage that sets you up for success in the medium term when we emerge out of this, is certainly something that, you know, founders certainly should consider for. And again, my perspectives are very much focused around here in the US markets, but I believe a lot of this generally translate into any international markets, certainly the Indian markets as well.
Especially, I mean, especially a lot of companies that we work with are cross-border companies, and you're very much global from day one. So absolutely, thank you, Kamakshi. Saket, to you. One of the things that made my day is when I got a call 7:30 a.m. from John Chambers talking about Saket Modi and how awesome he is, and Umesh as well. So so it's a no surprise that John Chambers loves you and your company. So talk about how critical is to have a support system, right? Investors, team, others, as you're helping, because the founder journey is hard, as you were clearly seeing it here. How critical is it to have that support system, especially for folks moving from India and looking into a newer market? And why is it important to have that, and how did you build it?
Sure, Priya, I like the saying, it says, true wisdom is not about what you know, it's about knowing what you don't know. I am a first-time entrepreneur. I started this company back from my dorm room. I'm still 29 years of age. And there are a gazillion things that I don't know, right? And the good parts of being young and a first-time founder, very high on energy, fairly hands-on with technology, and all of those good things. But what it doesn't come with is the experience of knowing how do you scale a business, especially globally, understanding the dynamics, how do you build the team, how do you build the culture, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the place where, getting the right kind of sound advisory board around you, who you can pick up the phone, people who really been there, done that in every way possible, really creates all the difference in the world. So I keep saying this, in my company, we're almost 200 people. And I seriously feel this, my job is the easiest one, because at one side, I have the most incredible set of advisors, investors, right? And you spoke about John, not just John. I mean, Umesh on the call has been like a mentor to me, because he's a few years ahead of me, and in true sense, right? I mean, he's transitioned, and there's so many things I get to learn from him, ask him, pick his brain, bug him so many times. And on the other side, I've got this incredible set of team members who are like, probably, so much more talented than me in their domain of what they do. So all I need to do is to be a bridge that on one side, I'm listening to, the John Chambers of the world of what needs to be done. And I just need to copy paste that and go to my team and, this is what I'm thinking. And, they say, wow, this 29-year-old kid looks like a very smart guy. So it really makes my life very simple. And when my team executes, John thinks it's me who's executing, right? Cybersecurity, great time to be, right? I mean, last quarter for me was actually the best quarter we've had in the history of our company. Order bookings, revenue bookings, all-time high. So that's the importance of having the right ecosystem. And obviously investors are the more obvious one. The lesser obvious one becomes, having the right kind of lawyers by your side, having the right bankers by your side, right, Priya? I mean, the reason John called you is because, we just started out in the US, and then, we wanted to have people who we can rely upon. And that's the reason he called you to say that, look, please keep Saket under your mentorship, that, he's taking the right decisions when he has his accounts with you and things around that, right? So that's the reason why it becomes very critical to surround yourself with people who you can trust and who've seen the movie many, many times. It just increases the probability of success. Did I answer your question, Priya?
No, it's great. I think you said it really in a very nice way, but I would say it's a lot on the founder as well, because I think you are taking that initiative to be open to learning and kind of changing and pivoting as much as there, folks can give, but you need to be able to take that and kind of make it your own. I think a lot of credit to you to do that, to make where you are today. And Umesh is nodding, so I know he agrees with me. So, I know we're running short of time, which I expected we would. To Nishith and Saket, maybe you can take this up first. As a global, we just talked about teams, right? You have large distributed teams. The new normal has changed the way we're living, obviously. Talk about how you're doing all of this, like working from home, like managing remote teams. Now this is truly a global panel because you both are now calling in from India because you moved there, right? What has changed, like for performance, processes? What are some of the immediate things that you've put in place to keep that machine running?
Nishith, you want to go first?
Go for it. Like, You were on a roll. I don't want to come after you.
Okay, yeah. So you're asking what's changed during the COVID times. Well, one of the things that John made me do and my team do is, make a what does it take to come out stronger plan. So the come out stronger plan, assuming, so we actually made scenarios: 3-month lockdown, 6-month lockdown, 9-month lockdown. So we chose the 6-month lockdown. Looks like that's still strong, holds true. And with the 6-month lockdown, how did we change our annual operating plans? See the hit which would take on the revenue stream. How do you cut your expenses to the bare minimum? And not just that, we actually took this very nice 5-point agenda, and that had things or changes on the product side, our channel enablement side. It had things like, okay, these are the 3 logos we really want in this 6 months, which is there. And suddenly, you actually see the whole team not really being demotivated because it's bad times or tough times, but you actually see the light on the end of the tunnel. It's like writing the press release before you start doing something that, look, this is what success means. This is what we feel is doable. And you need to get that bottoms up, right? So I asked my CRO, I asked my product person, engineering leader, et cetera, that, look, what can we really do? And they said, look, this is on target, this is stretch, and this is what I'd like to go for. And we really hit it all off in terms of, meeting those expectations. And obviously that gets coupled with taking care of your people, the priority becoming health, both physical and mental, because it is a tough time for a lot of people for so many reasons. And my average team size is, team age is 26. So it's a very different kind of a time that they're in. So I've been doing weekly town halls with my whole organizations, keeping them posted very, very clearly about both the ups and the downs. We did very well in revenue, but cash flow is a problem because customers are not paying. So being very open around that and discussing very openly the challenges and of course all the good part, I think that's really got us through this, and things look stronger than ever before. So that's what we did, Priya.
That's
Nishith.
great. Open communication for sure. Nishith, I know I want you to address that one. And also you and I chatted a bit about your new hires. One, it's great to hear new hires, period, at this time. So talk a bit about that and how is that playing, especially in this time of the, year.
Sure. So we have teams across Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh, Bombay, Bangalore, Florida, West, SF, Berlin, right? So most of us are pretty used to working async across time zones, right? So I think we got lucky there. To be honest, I don't think I have a sophisticated enough HR setup, which would have instantly helped adapting or something. It was just that we were already broadly doing it, right? What does become a bit of an issue without travel, without people meeting each other, right? Is what in programming we often call like a single source of truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would double down on what Saket said about communication, right? And I think one of the things I learned is like repetitive communication.
Right.
I was always a bit afraid of repeating the same message till somebody told me that, dude, a prayer doesn't get destroyed by repetition. And that stuck really, really close to me, right? That just made a lot of sense. So for example, this quarter when we did our roadmap for product, we sent out a mail to the admin team and the finance team as well, explaining why we picked something and why we did not pick something, right? Whether we do pay cuts and swap them with ESOPs or not was not just a one-person decision. It was told to all 206 people flat out, right? That we have always told you your ESOPs are more valuable than cash. We're not going to reverse up it, right? So yeah, whatever be your call, but it's just very, very important to maintain single source of truth. And we've received, we have like some metrics to measure around it, and we definitely saw an uptick on them post that, right? Like just be the single source of truth, explain everything to everyone, right? Write a lot of emails. Emails are good. You have time to, fix your temper. So yeah, so I think that, right? And then coming on the second part, I think this is one of the most, we started in the first B2C recession, right? So we just have like really amazing experiences of recession where, a lot of faff goes out, right? A lot of great people are available for the right reasons. We have more than 10 PhDs in the team, and we are constantly, requesting people to join us from worldwide, from diverse fields. Like right now, my chief data scientist is a microbiologist from Carnegie Mellon, right? He used to work at Script Research in core biology. So yeah, I think it's very, very important right now to get the right. And right now, it's also a good time to identify good leadership talent, right? Like people are just there for the right reason. So recessions are good from talent perspective. They're beautiful times to both build and attract. And by the way, like in 2016 first half, when there was a peak of the recession, we did 16 hires. We have 14 of them still. One of them opened a startup. We lost one, right? So you do get right people for the right reason who stick on, right? Like it's a 1,000-day experiment. It has resulted.
Right. Right. No, that's great. You know, I think it's all about communication. I think you guys are reiterating that it's critical to have those to ensure that, you know, as much as we're feeling anxious, our teams are feeling anxious. So it's just critical to keep that honest communication up. Kamakshi, I want to go to you in terms of like, you know, Nishith talks about diversity in terms of lateral thinkers, right? Hiring. You know, it's no surprise that you're kind of like, for me, just as having a successful exit is not an easy feat, period. And then add to it a South Asian female immigrant founder in the enterprise space. Add all of these, it just makes it like, I don't even know how you made, exactly. It just deserves like a standing applause at this moment. But I'm so proud of what you've done, and would love for you to share, what is your biggest lesson? I know there's like you can write a book, but what would be your biggest lesson or advice be for folks listening to the call today who are not the typical face that an enterprise company would have, right? What advice would you have as they're taking their next step? It could be the next customer that they're trying to get or next raise that they're trying to make. What would you give them? How did you make it?
Well, before I answered, Priya, that was like super kind words on your behalf for me. There are many like me, and that's a testament to the fact that, you know, entrepreneurship in some way, there's no playbook for it. You know, successful entrepreneurs define the playbook, and that becomes sort of the way to do it next. In fact, the irony here is that the same approach, if it didn't succeed, is chided and talked about and derided. But the same approach, if it did succeed, then it is heralded as sort of, you know, the way to do it and the way to go forward. So that's why for me, I would say that my experience has said that, look, there is no sort of right or wrong way to proceed. I love the conviction that sort of, you know, young founders and entrepreneurs like Saket, Nishith, etc., have so much confidence and conviction in themselves. If I were to basically say one word of advice specifically to female founders, is just to have that sort of sense of conviction and courage of conviction in themselves. And also this thing about like doing it the right way, there is no right way. You are defining the right way. You're successful, that becomes the right way for the next set of founders to go follow your sort of path on. And I think it's evident in the stories that are being shared here, whether it is from these panelists or otherwise who are also the audience who are listening to us, is that there's a lot of discomfort in this journey. It is not easy to have that conversation of swapping ESOPs to, you know, cash comp. While that is a known fact, it is still not a, you know, kind of a comfortable conversation to have with a 200+ person team. So that discomfort, whether it is speaking to your employees, to your board, when you're basically announcing or giving them a flash of what plan looks like, or whether it is talking to your customers on how a particular feature and or product did not quite meet their expectations, all of these are points of discomfort. And the fact that you have to find comfort in this sort of, you know, reality of discomfort that we are in, and there are new forms of discomfort entrepreneurs have every single day and founders have every single day. And the ones that succeed are the ones who live with this comfortably. So my mantra has been like, you know, comfortable and discomfort, right? Be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And I think, and again, having that comfort in discomfort should be built on a courage of conviction, solid technology, great product, real value that you're bringing to your customers. You're not standing on a fluffy platform, you're standing on some solid ground, but you're willing to wade through all sort of, the challenges that are coming through your way that put you in positions of discomfort. And again, having this conviction that there is no right way, the way you are defining it. And if you're successful, you're defining what the new right way is going to be. And I think if I can say something, and if I can leave the audience with this, and if Saket and Nishith in their journeys are going to basically sort of encounter some of these and remember this, then I think that's basically what it takes to kind of get there.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so proud just listening to how you're saying these, because hopefully folks are taking that in as they're putting their journey together. I know we're right at time. So I want to go through all of you to get one word of advice to the folks listening today. It could be a founder, investor, or an aspiring founder. How to lead in terms of this crisis. So Umesh, we'll start with you.
My playbook in crisis, and I founded the company in 2008. So here we are again, right? So I think the best year to found the company, I wasn't as big in 2008, so it mattered less. I do very well personally when I break down the problem into smaller pieces. That's just my engineer's mind. I've been trained that way. And once I have a plan, it's hardest for me to get to the plan. Once I have the plan, it's just super easy execution, as hard as it might be, like Kamakshi said. So for me, it just stay calm, take the time to plan out your next moves. Saket mentioned a great playbook. Write down your press release next year, what you want it to be, and work backwards to say, what will you do now, next 3 months, next 6 months, and how do we get there? So stay calm and plan is going to be my key advice.
Umesh,
Great advice.
some of the best companies are founded during times of crisis. So when you
I was about to say, yeah, I'm so glad I know Umesh. Saket?
Yeah, so for me, it's pretty simple. I think everybody who does any job has a question at some point in their life: are you good enough to do that job? As a founder, as a CEO, I think this is that time where you would know for yourself, are you good enough or not? So this is not like a comforting thing, but the fact of the matter is that, true leadership is not when everything's going right, but it's really about when things are not, going right. And that defines who you are and what your startup is. So I would say just keep that in mind. And if you're made for it, and it doesn't mean that, if the ship sink once, you learn that and then you can again come back. But then that is also the founder conviction which is there. So I think just keeping that in mind that, look, you were meant for this time. You were born for this time. Let me put it like this, right? And if you keep that in mind, things become a little more lighter. And like, look, this is now my playground. I'm going to be comfortable here. And I'm going to make sure I hit the ball out of the park. Yeah.
That's great. Nishith, you said it well in the chat, but.
Yeah, so I'll say in terms of crisis specifically, listen to data even more. Yes. Bad news is still factually correct. It sucks, but right. So yeah, that's all.
Kamakshi, last word. Oh, sorry.
No, can't be good.
No worries.
My only point I'd like to add is compassionate leadership. The difference between compassion and empathy, just to quote Jeff Wiener's sort of philosophy. Jeff Wiener, the previous CEO of LinkedIn, is, empathy is you feel the other person's sort of challenges and pain, whether they're your customer, employee, partner, investor, whoever they be. And compassion is your ability to influence and participate from a solutioning perspective. So that's where I would say compassionate leadership, again, going back to those examples of, having those hard conversations with your team, with your employees, with your customers, etc. How do you sort of play a compassionate role toward that? Mm-hmm. I think you will deliver some of the hardest messages or make some of the toughest calls better as a compassionate leader.
Yeah, I think we're right at time. I just wanted to say, hopefully the audience enjoyed the session as much as I did. Thank you guys so much for sharing all your candid insights, thoughts. And I'm sure there is a lot of key takeaways from this panel that our folks are going to take away. So thanks again and have a great day. Kumar, over to you.
Thank you, guys. What a great session with such successful stories and how you guys dealing with the current situation and a lot of different playbooks. So I hope all these playbooks, people are watching here and learning from them. Feel free to reach out to any panelists and ask more questions if you couldn't get it through right now. But all in all, thank you, Priya. Thank you, Saket, Nishith, and Kamakshi, and Umesh, and for their great insights. With this, we are going to, this will be the end of the Road to TiEcon session today.
Bye.